Okay, so now we're going to get started. I'm going to show you how to make this example infographic in this free platform called Visme. Okay, so in Visme, this is the example that I'm going to be making for you all. And hopefully through recreating this, I'll be able to show you all the different features, or at least some of the features that you'll be using. And I hope most of them. But again, if there's something you want to do in Visme that I'm not showing you, feel free to send me an email and we can I can either do another screencast for you or we can do a video conference. So this is from a data set that I pulled on Washington State small businesses. And so there's, this is an extremely zoomed out view of it. I just wanted to be able to show you. Obviously when this is at full screen, which, yeah, this is the 100% size of it. You can sort of read a little bit more about it. And yeah, all this data is coming from this small business profile from the U.S. Small Business Administration. I did not know such a thing existed. But yeah, all kinds of data here. Some of it is visualized. Some of it is visualized poorly. We'll be revisualizing it, and some of it is just simple text. So, so once you create your free account in Visme, I'm going to go back to my dashboard, and I'm just going to click Create. Oh, I don't want this. Okay. Huh. Project. Okay, so I press Create. So there is a tab just for infographics, and there are already made templates that you can work from, and you can just simply replace the data that's in them. But I think today we're just going to create our own with a blank template. So one of the things about Visme is that you can make them as long as you want. Infographics tend to be long and skinny because it's easier to scroll that way. Since a lot of infographics contain multiple different, charts, graphs, and other graphics. So just know that you can always extend this as far as you want. And so we have different types of content here. We have basics, we have graphics, photos, data. We're not going to get into media, but you can upload some, I guess, time-based media like audio or video. There's colors. You can create your own upload. So you can, if there's not something that you're finding here, perhaps an image or a graphic, then you can search for it on the web, download it, and then upload it to your project here. And the apps, we're not going to get into, but it can be integrated with several apps, one of which I haven't heard of. So let's just start with a header and text. So it's going to give me some examples here so I can see how they look. And let's say I just choose this graphic design one. So I can customize this as much as I want. And maybe what I'll create will be a little bit different than the first example that I created. So note that when these sort of header and text pairs come along, they will be grouped. And so because of that, if they're still grouped and I try to sort of resize this, I'm not going to be able to make it wider. I can only basically resize everything to the same proportion, and they both move together. However, I can ungroup these, and then I can click on one of these text boxes, and then I can start to get more into some other features. So couple things, you might need to double click to get some of these more basic transformations or I guess features of your text to show up. Things like if you want to bold or italicize it, the size, the font, the alignment, etc. So let's see. So remembering what this infographic is about, let's do first, I think probably again, thinking about visual hierarchy, probably small business is more important than the fact it's in Washington State. So I'm going to start with small businesses. And I can then change this to something like in Washington State. Okay. Now, again, I can choose whatever alignment I want. Remember what I said about if you're going to establish symmetry, you're gonna have to sort of commit to it throughout because of consistency. So I don't want to commit to an entirely symmetrical infographic, so I'm not going to I'm not going to actually start out with symmetry, just so that I can leave that open. So maybe I'll do this right alignment because it's so rare that that it'll stand out, that things are aligned to the right. So from here, again, I can double click and then I can highlight and change things. I actually do like Oswald as a font. I use it a lot. So I'll keep that. But I don't like this font down here. It looks too, I don't know, futuristic for me. So one good thing is I can preview all of these fonts. You know, and again, so if I want to go for some contrast, Oswald is kind of a tall font, so maybe I'll go for something a little bit wider than tall. I also really like Montserrat, so I'm going to change it to Montserrat. And yeah, I'm going to keep both of them in all caps because it's really easy to read. So then now I need to start choosing a color palette. So what's great is that if I want to change the color of this, I'll click on this font color. It's going to give me some preset font or colors, and but this will be repopulated with colors that I start to use, so that if I want to reuse a color, which is always a good idea, again for consistency's sake, they'll start to show up here. I can start with also a preset. So let's say I don't want to go into coolers.co and make my own color palette. I can choose one of these color palettes, and I can even modify one of these color palettes. So bearing in mind that, you know, orange blue is usually a good, safe bet for color palettes, keeping in mind our colorblind friends, I'm going to start to look for one that has a blue and an orange in it, and then I can start to modify. So yeah, I kind of like these, and it's going to let me, if I choose it here, I'm just choosing one color because I have something highlighted. If I want to kind of just choose a general color for the entire document, I can go over here, and now I forgot which one I was looking at. I think I was looking at this one. So I'm going to choose this, and now when I go back to edit this, it's going to give me theme colors. So again, I can edit this as much as I want. I don't know, let's see, I want to go with something dark for this word small businesses. So I'm going to start with this color, but I don't know if I actually like it that much, so I'm going to alter it slightly. The way you do that is you start with your color first, then click this plus sign, and it'll automatically pull up these color pickers, but it'll stay within that color that you've already chosen, so then you can alter it just slightly. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to make this less of a purple, and drag this over here a little bit, and maybe go for more of a peacock green. So something like this. Yeah, that looks good. And so that's, I have to remember though that that's up there and the rest of my color palette is down here. So we have that color, and then for this one, let's see, why isn't the whole word highlighting? There we go. And maybe we can try something sunnier here, like this gold. Yeah, and again, I can slightly alter this if I feel like maybe the brightness of it is causing some legibility issues, just to be on the safe side. So since this is already selected and I click here, I start with that color, then I can adjust it slightly. So maybe I'll drag it down a little bit and make it a little more, well, no, I'm going to keep it saturated, but I'm going to pull down the brightness here. And I'll click OK. And yeah, that looks a little bit more legible. All right, so then I can also put in some sort of graphic that can quickly communicate what this infographic is about. So I can click on graphics, and I can search the word Washington. And I do have this one Washington state outline, and unfortunately it has the word Washington in the middle of it in what I believe is Times New Roman font, which is not interesting or sexy at all. So we're going to change that, but first let's change the color. Let's go to something in our color palette. Maybe this, kind of dark orange. So I'm going to show you how to group objects so that you can kind of create a compound shape. So I'm going to go to basics, and I'm going to X out of header and text, and I'm just going to go with graphics. Let's see. No, that's not where I want to find this. Maybe here in graphics. I'll go back. I'll X out of this. I'll go with just basic shapes. And so maybe I will choose this rectangle, and I will make the rectangle the same color as this Washington state, and I will resize it. And what I'm going to do is just simply move it over, and then to select both of these shapes in order to group them, I'm gonna just take my regular cursor, click and drag this selection box, and as long as this box that I click and drag, again, I didn't do anything special, I just clicked with my mouse and dragged. As long as it touches both of those two objects, then they are selected, and I can hit group. And now, when I go to move it, they all move together. So it's like that ugly Washington label was never there. So now I have my title, but let's take a look here. I don't think that there's enough breathing room over here. So what I'm going to do is I forgot to regroup these, first of all. Another way that you can select multiple objects is to click on one object, hold down Shift, and click on the other object. And so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to just drag it a little bit further away from the corner so I have this nice breathing room all around. And notice that I have the same, kind of like the relatively same amount of breathing room all around these graphics. Okay, so I had to stop and re-record because I hit the limit of my recording time for this app I'm using. So we've now created our header, and again, it's this this color is a little bit close to red, but because it's standing by itself, it's not a huge deal. But I will be cognizant of whether I need to shift this a little bit further away from red if I put it in a scenario where it needs to be distinguished from another color that is more on the green spectrum. So I'll keep an eye on that, but I'm not going to change it for now. So now let's start to work with some of our data here. I've noticed that a lot of infographics tend to put something very, very simple at the top and get more complex as it goes down. I think that's probably a good practice because if we think about our visual hierarchy, we're going to look more at the top than we are at the bottom. And so something simple might allow the viewer to sort of grab onto something and interpret something really quickly and get an idea of what this infographic is all about. So I'm going to look for an interesting stat. The interesting stat that I found actually was at the top here, this diversity. So there's a 29.9% increase in minority ownership of small businesses. And I know from looking at some of the other data, so the diversity statistic tracks changes between 2007 and 2012. And yeah, this is a little outdated, but it takes a while to gather statistics. So one thing I do want to sort of just note here is that I know that a lot of you are going to be dealing with demographic data. I would avoid something like this, how this report represents different types of people. The reason being is I would just avoid the gender binary altogether. So these very dated, very old looking women's restroom versus men's restroom, those symbols are starting to be challenged as we understand more about gender fluidity and how common that is. I would just avoid anything that reinforces stereotypes or binaries altogether. So just a little side note. And I'm gonna just remember this 29.9% increase in minority ownership, and I'm going to use that to be my first statistic that I call out at the top. And what's cool is that when we go to graphics, or maybe it's basics, stats and figures. So you go to basics and then stats and figures. There are a bunch of sort of statistical call-outs. Something where there's a remarkable statistic or something important or noteworthy, right? And it's represented in a bunch of different ways. So depending on what the stat is that you're calling out, again, like I don't like this, but I can see how maybe in some cases there might be use for it. I'm just going to start with a 6 billion one, and I'm going to pull it over here. And notice that it automatically changed the color to fit my color palette. If you notice this, we have to ungroup this if we're going to start to change some things about it. But yeah, so if you notice this, it changed from this brighter blue to this more muted blue because it knew that that was in my theme color. However, it's a little bit similar to this muted blue. So first of all, I'm going to actually change this to this blue. And I'm going to do the same thing for the word billion. Again, I'm going to change what it says, but just bear with me. And we can, I like to sort of repeat a color down here because I don't want to just start using random colors. So I want, in order to demonstrate that I have a consistent color palette, I might want to repeat one of these colors. So I'm going to choose this gold, or no, not that gold, because remember we changed it to this darker gold. Okay, so now I'm going to change this to, now I forgot the statistic, 29.9%. So I'm going to do 29.9. And then down here, I'm going to put the word, okay, the word percent. And then I'm going to take this over here, and I'm going to put 29 point, because I notice that up here, the statistic is repeated here. 29.9% increase in minority owned businesses in Washington, right? Okay, so the other thing is, I notice a lot of infographics just use like a bunch of fonts. I would say like maybe do a maximum of 4 fonts, otherwise it can get just really overwhelming. So I can choose to repeat these fonts, or maybe I can explore some different fonts. So let's see. This is using Lato as a font, which I kind of like. Let's see if there's anything else. But yeah, I like Lato. I'm just going to keep it. And then for this one, Helvetica, it's a little too simple for me. So I'm going to maybe choose, I don't know, another kind of tall font. So maybe something like Antonio. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And again, I'm going to line it up so that things look consistent. And then I'm going to regroup these together. And I'll do this. I will hit group. And I'm going to want to make this bigger. This is a call out statistic, so let's just make this a little bit bigger, and maybe I'll put this in the center. And again, I'll have to just see how things look with everything else. My design process is I just sort of like go through and I keep adjusting things just to keep balance with the whole composition as a whole. So I might choose to change this later, but we'll see. So I'm going to drag this down, and then I'm going to show you probably only one of the chart examples. So if I want to now get into chart territory or graph territory, I'm going to click on data. I would notice all of these premium data visualization. It's a little confusing. It's a little misleading. It looks like there's an infinite number of premium things, but only a small amount of standard choices. But actually, if you click Create Chart at the top, we now see that we can, in fact, choose a bunch of different charts. Of course, the things with the stars are going to be for premium accounts, so we're going to stay away from those. So let's go with this like half donut. And it's automatically put things in the color palette that I chose. And I'm just going to move it down so I can see it at least. And maybe expand a little bit more. When I click on this, I can now start to manipulate the data that it came with. So one of the things that I can do is I can change these labels and I can change the numbers in them. I can also change where it says Series 1. It won't display Series 1. It will just display whatever I choose to display. So taking a look here, I'm gonna, one of the things that I could do is maybe do something like this where I show just exactly, we see this 29.9% increase in minority-owned small businesses in Washington State. And maybe I can break that down even further by talking about the different demographics of minorities that have started to own businesses or increase their percentage of small business ownership in Washington State. So, again, I'm just going to start to copy and paste here. Actually, it looks like they don't have any data on, or maybe there's zero change. I have no idea. But there's no data for African-American owned small businesses. So we'll just skip to the next one. Asian owned small businesses increased by 23.2%. So I'm just going to put there and then 23.2. Now I am going to have to be mindful about the way I represent this actually, now that I think about it. Because these percentages aren't going to add up to 100. They're just simply the percentage of change in business ownership. So whether, the total number of Asian-owned businesses went up or down. So the fact that I'm presenting this as this half donut as if it all adds up to 100% might be a little misleading. So I'm actually going to change this to a bar graph. Okay, that looks a little bit better and more accurate to what I'm trying to represent. So I'll just keep going. Looks like the largest percentage of change went to Hawaiian and Pacific Islander owned businesses. And that was at 53.7%. One thing to be mindful of is you don't want to have too many categories of things because you'll start to run out of colors, or you'll start to run out of colors that can be distinguished from one another. And so it's good to choose something that maybe has like 5 to 6 or 4 to 6 categories instead of, I don't know, 12. Imagine how hard that would be to try to choose 12 different, oh, it is displaying series 1. I'm just going to delete that because I don't want that. And it doesn't like that I'm putting the percentage in here. So now that that's there, why isn't it updating? That is interesting. Let me just refresh. That's what I always do when things are confusing. Oh, and there's that bar again. Okay, so it somehow stopped updating and then it updated after a refresh. So I guess keep that in mind. And we'll continue to copy and paste our data in here. Notice that you can import data. You can import data from a Google spreadsheet. I tried it and it did not work for me. So if you can get it to work for you, let me know. Let me know how. So just gonna keep going. Oh, okay. Oh, I want to make sure that percent isn't in there because it doesn't like that. And I think that's what caused it to freak out at me earlier. Okay. It seems to be doing okay. There's that 29.9% statistic. Just don't want to confuse it. And then we have this negative number. So let's see what happens to the visualization when we add a negative number. And voila, so it then extends the axis, the y-axis down to -20, and it shows us this negative number. So great. So I can keep it like this in this color palette, which yeah, looks like it's okay. I don't really think there's enough contrast between the different shades of red, so I'm actually going to change it to just different colors. So, well, all right. Sorry about that. All right, so if I click on this, it's going to pull up my color palette, which is so great. Yeah, I'll just keep it that color because that's a color already in my palette. But yeah, maybe I'll change it to this orange. Let's see if there's enough contrast between the orange and the yellow. I think there is. I think so. And we'll do that. And then for this last one, I have to remember that I went away from that color and I selected this color up here. And not only is it nicely resembling a rainbow, but yeah, it's fitting within our color palette. There's enough contrast between the different shades. And notice if I start to expand this, my legend then becomes 2 different rows, which I think probably is better for the alignment, so it's not so tall and taking up that much room. So then we can start to go into settings, and I can title this, you know, percent change in business ownership by demographic. Something like that. If I click this gear button, I can now start to change the font and the color of this. So let's see. What are some colors that I just used? I don't want to, maybe I'll do Antonio again. And then I'll choose, I don't know, something that I haven't used yet. So maybe I'll do this teal color. And then I can also change the size if I want. Yeah, maybe I'll change the size. And then I can also change the axis and the legend. So I can label these axes if I want. I probably do need to at least label the y-axis with percent. And I can also click on that gear and I can change the color of that if I want. And I definitely don't want Arial. It's too plain for me. So maybe I'll go back to something like, I don't know, Montserrat. Let's do Montserrat. Yeah. And let's see. Let's choose it's hard to know if that's black or dark gray, but either way looks fine to me. And again, I can change the size of that. I find 18 is a good size. And then I can do the same thing with the legend, right? So I'm going to go back to Montserrat here. And I can just type that in if I want to. And let's see. How do we get it back to being those 2 different rows? I suppose, oh, there we go. Awesome. And then, yeah, I'm going to get that as best I can. Okay. And so here are my 2 charts. Now, if I had more control over how this was presenting, I would probably increase the space between the title and the start of the chart, but I can't really do that. One thing I could do is let's see what happens if I cut that, and then let's see what happens if so I can just paste it here, and then I can just make it that same font and color pairing. So now I have to remember what this was. I believe it was Antonio. It was this teal color, and now I can, you know, I can deal with a little bit of symmetry. And it's, you know, it's fine to sort of temporarily go to symmetry, but it's really hard to establish symmetry at the top and then break it. It just ends up always looking weird to me. And I'm actually going to increase this to maybe 30. And I want it to be a true center. So, and notice I'm getting these lines that are sort of telling me like where the center of the page is. It's going to snap to positions that it thinks make sense with this design. And now we can kind of zoom out a little bit, and we see our infographic. So one of the things I might do is I might make this bigger, and I might make this font a little bit fancier. Just because it's such a big number, and so yeah, I could maybe start to choose a 5th font if I want to. What happens if we try the Centennial font? And then I change this maybe to Montserrat or something similar. Maybe I change this to Lato. And yeah. And so now I can ungroup and kind of resize some of these. Yeah. So yeah, if I do something like this, and again, notice that I'm lining things up precisely so that they appear to be in alignment. And then like one thing I might do is I kind of like this idea that one of these is really tall and the other is short and skinny. So I could do something like this. I could group it. And then I would want a little bit more white space. So I'm going to move this down and just create some white space. You can also create sort of separations in the different types of data that you're presenting. Again, if you go to, let's see, graphics. No, not that one. The other graphics. You can go to arrows and lines. You can put a line in there if you want. And maybe I'll just do that under the title, just to show that this is the title and everything else is the actual data. So I'm just going to do a simple line. Okay, yeah. And then I'll make it a color that I feel is underutilized, and it's okay to go to like kind of 1 or 2 main colors. So I can also, I don't know, reuse this teal to establish it as a main color. And yeah, so that is data visualization and infographics. Once you're done with this, the way you can share it with other people, a few different ways. Sorry, I need to make sure all my margins are kind of consistent all around. Is you can click the download button. You can choose it as a JPEG. You can choose it as a PDF. I have no idea how it would do this as a video. I do know that you can animate your graphics, but that would be something that you would want to discuss with your professor and make sure that that's okay, and peruse yourself, since I haven't really experimented with that much. And yeah, so I'm going to do a JPEG. I'm not going to do any of these premium features, and I'll just download. And it's been automatically downloaded, and there is my infographic all ready to go. So I hope this was helpful. You have any other questions, again, my email address is hoytkl@plu.edu. And I hope you create some cool infographics. Thanks.